Yeah, so one of the biggest problems we had was the vetting process. I mean, some of the things that we were requiring or allowed to sponsor a child was Photoshop pictures of people that are photoshopping. Oh yeah, this is a picture of me with the child's mom, and the mom's feet are not even there. You know, that they've been cut off. No driver's license, no fingerprints. The Biden administration ended DNA testing for family relationships. So all this, we were just basically getting kids out of custody and placed in of whoever filled out the paperwork. 70% of the state had fraud applications. There was some level of fraud, meaning multiple social security numbers, fake birth certificates, identification cards that were not valid. So that's why you had 300,000 missing kids.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. When most people think about the border, they picture Border Patrol agents patrolling through the desert or stopping people at the border wall. But what might surprise you is just how many other federal agencies are actually involved with the border and how complex it really gets behind the scenes. Today, we're going to take a closer look at one of those other agencies with a guest who we've had on here before. He spent over 20 years with the U.S. Border Patrol, eventually leading the Yuma sector, where he was on the front lines of border enforcement. But after retiring, he wasn't done serving. He made a move you don't really hear about. He went to the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS. There, he worked on the other side of the border issue. And he's here today to break down what's happening at the border and what he did at HHS. I want to welcome Chief Chris Clem back to the podcast. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And what a really nice introduction. And it really is important for all the audience members and listeners and people that are interested in border security to recognize that it is a very complex and dynamic situation. For years, we talked about the border is dynamic, it is fluid, and there is no one size fit all solution, just like there's not just one agency solution for the crisis that we've experienced and what we're dealing with right now to secure the border and hopefully really for years to come up with solutions. So it's not just Border Patrol or ICE or the ports. It's a level and multi-layer and multifunctional government process, and many departments and many agencies are involved.
You know, that was something I had the privilege of going to the border a few years back. In my case, it was down in McAllen, that area in Texas. The thing that really struck me, the biggest thing I took away from that was hearing from agents who really made the point, like there's different solutions depending on what we're trying to accomplish here. And that's such an important part of the strategy is that there's not just a wall, there's not just, a number of different things. There's a lot of different things that we need to do, different strategies that we can have to accomplish our goals here. So I'm excited to talk more about that. But before we get going, I mean, we have some listeners, obviously, who might not have run into you on our other episodes. Can you just give a brief history of your time with the Border Patrol?
Yeah, I started in 1995 under then President Clinton. And it's interesting because we look at kind of how the campaign went for the last, federal election. And they talked about the big crime bill and all this stuff. I was hired from the 1994 crime bill when they were putting, they wanted to put 100,000 officers on the street to include border guards. That's what President Clinton called us. And so I joined the Border Patrol in 1995. Actually, this July 9th will be the 30th anniversary of when I joined the U.S. Border Patrol. I did 27 and a half years in the uniform with the agency. I think it was 9 different locations. I started off as a young Border Patrol agent trainee at the GS5 level in a town called Lordsburg, New Mexico, in the Boot Heel. And I like to it's funny, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, but I grew up in Houston, Texas. We moved there when I was a small child. I had more people in my high school in Houston than the entire county had in that Boot Heel area of New Mexico. So it was a big culture shift for me, but I fell in love with the job. I really did. And I promoted through the ranks, through the natural progression, from a journeyman agent to a senior patrol agent, supervisor. I actually have the unique honor to being the only one that we can find in history to command 5 separate Border Patrol stations. I was the patrol agent in charge in 3 states and covered 5 stations during my time as an agent in charge. We have sectors. We have 20 sectors around the border, northern, southern, coastal. But each sector has, a half dozen or more stations, and I actually commanded 5 of them. And we can't find anybody that's done that. Maybe back in the early days in the 1920s when we started, somebody may have done that. But so I take that as a badge of honor and a privilege to be given that authority to command and lead men and women to do our job. Um, from there, I did my time in headquarters. It seems like everybody has to go up through the headquarters ranks, and really, you age in dog years when you're up there. I was up there for 2.5 years, but it was great to see the other side and the kind of the political winds that form policy. I was a deputy chief in New Orleans, Louisiana, the deputy chief in El Paso, Texas, and then was appointed the chief patrol agent in Yuma, Arizona at the end of 2020. And I did that for just over 2 years, almost 2 years to the date, 2 years and a couple weeks, because you know, the administration at the time, the Biden administration, had just unraveled everything that I had worked for in my 27 years and what was built off the blood, sweat, and tears of border patrol agents for the 100 years before me. And I couldn't change policy, and it was the right time for me and my family. I lived away from my wife and kids for most of the last 10 years of my career. And I thought I could be a big advocate for border security and a voice for those that don't have the voice, that are stuck in the government, if you will, that can't speak. And I did that, for 2 years after retiring, and was working with Americans for Prosperity. And golly, last year, I would say since August of 23, I think in that 18-month time frame, I think I did 19 states and 54 cities, bringing the border to the people, right? And I am very proud of the work we did with Americans for Prosperity to bring the border message to small town USA, to big cities, and really bring the truth. And I think that's so important for the American people that can't travel to the border. And AFP did bring people to the border to see it firsthand, but to be able to bring that message and what we've worked hard to do, to have it, unraveled by the administration. And thank goodness, the current Trump administration has put all the practices back in place to secure our border. And so I would say that where we are today, much better than where we were the last 4 years, and even better than the first Trump 45 administration, when you look at the numbers compared to what we see in the past.
Well, I mean, what would you say are kind of the concrete differences between the Biden administration's approach to the border and what they did and the current Trump administration?
I mean, it really comes down to leadership and putting America's safety and national security first. I don't know anybody in my circle that is not in favor of lawful, legal immigration. So many people that I know are first, second generation Americans. I've lived on the Southwest border now for close to 30 years of my life. I know a lot of people that have seen this firsthand, have experienced it like I have. And we're all about, lawful, legal immigration that benefits the country. But none of us should be in favor of what we saw in the open border mindset that created a huge crisis under the Biden administration. And it really comes down to backbone. President Trump, he says a lot of things that can turn some people off, but he follows up with some action that has been really, really, put America first, and from a security perspective. As I mentioned kind of in the opening or during our conversation before we went live, it's the border is dynamic and fluid, and there's always going to be threats. So we have to look at this not from an immigration issue, but from a national security and public safety issue. Immigration and border security are very close, but they're not. They're not one. You can't have one and the other. It works together, but the security piece comes first, and we've seen that throughout our history. That when you secure the border and you open up lawful pathways, you can have a manageable, safe, and healthy border. What we saw under Biden was open the border wide open, catch and release, get people out of your custody. We'll deal with it later. Well, now 10 million plus people later, we're having to deal with it. And now people, we're 10 days into protests and riots around the country. That's a result of open borders. That's a result of gaslighting. That's a result of ideology that has caused chaos to the lawful immigration system, to the people that are really trying to do the right thing, those that are really being persecuted. They're being lumped in because of this mass open border mindset that was put in place by the Biden administration. President Trump campaigned on securing the border and shutting things down. He's done that. I can tell you, I obviously I don't have access to the daily numbers anymore because I've since left the administration last month. But when you go back to December of 23, when the lowest numbers polling numbers on the Biden administration on border security and immigration, we were averaging over 10,000 illegal entry and arrest every day. And I believe last month we were averaging around 250 a day across the entire nation. I mean, that's a huge, huge difference. And most of that demographics in the 250 a day that we're averaging now are traditional countries like Mexico and Central America. Not as many exotics, if you will. The last year under Biden, 177 different countries. People came from 177 different countries. And when I was chief of UMA, I think we caught 116 different countries my final year there. So it's a big night and day because of policy and action versus rhetoric and inaction. And that's basically the black and white. There's no gray area between the two administrations.
You kind of mentioned that the Trump administration has really kind of demonstrated backbone. Is it really that they're enforcing the laws that should have already been enforced? Or is there other things that they're doing to really make such a dramatic impact on the number of people illegally crossing every day?
Well, you bring up a very good question. I mean, they really are just enforcing the laws that are on the book. There's been no new laws passed. There was no need for comprehensive immigration reform. That was the big push. We had to have this border bill that was, bipartisan, which was really not a very good bill in any standards. We just needed somebody to come in and enforce the law on the books. The backbone comes from not bending to the political whims, not bending to special interests. At least on the front end, get out there and have that forward-facing border security response to the interior enforcement, and then working on the kids. I mean, think about this. When it comes to border security and immigration, the Trump administration, the campaign, if you will, ran on a three-legged stool is what I'll call it. It was secure the border. Well, they've done that. Border Patrol agents have never had so much, latitude to go out there and do their job and secure the border. And I can't think of how many years. Number two, we're seeing the display of the targeted enforcement operations around the country. Yeah, it gets blended when they're being called raids and there's called sweeps, but they all started with the targeted enforcement of criminals and public safety threats around the country. And then the last piece, which is one of the things we'll talk about, where I was part of the first 100 days of the Trump administration, was the missing kids, ending the child trafficking and exploitation that was part of that open border policy. So the first two legs are the public can see it, right? You can see the display of border patrol agents on the border. You see ICE and other law enforcement partners going out there and doing the targeted operations throughout the country. What you don't always see is the missing kids and all the operations going on there, because it's children. It's sensitive. It's complex. There's a lot of, it's not as cut and dry as it may have seen on a campaign trail, but it's being done, it's being exercised, and people are going to jail. So kids are being rescued and people are going to jail.
That's great. And I want to get to that because I'm pretty excited about the work you were doing. But just generally, as you talk to your colleagues in the Border Patrol currently, I mean, I would imagine morale has gone up quite a bit. I mean, what do Border Patrol agents, what are they feeling now under this president?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, once the election results were certified and we knew who the new president was going to be, they were elated. I there's a scene in the movie Braveheart with Mel Gibson where he's William Wallace and he's telling everybody to hold, hold, hold. That's kind of where the workforce was, right? Let's wait till January 20th at noon, and then it's like, let's go. And that's really what happened. I mean, they were the the handcuffs were taken off them, and they got to put them back on the bad guys. And and so all the processing, the catch and release that ended on day one. I was getting pictures from my old sector in Yuma. And they're like, "Hey, Chief, did you realize you actually had a parking lot? Because my back parking lot had nothing but tents and buses and bodies out there for the almost the 18 months out of the last 24 months I was there." So the morale is through the roof. They're super excited about being able to do their job, and knowing that they can actually prosecute people for breaking the law. They can the entire weight of the U.S. government is behind the men and women of law enforcement. And back to specifically to the Border Patrol, we know that we have Attorney General Pam Bondi, who has directed all her U.S. attorneys to back the Border Patrol's prosecutorial efforts, because again, it is a crime to illegally enter the United States. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's just a misdemeanor. It's just this." It is a U.S. crime. It is 8 U.S.C. 1325 to enter illegally, harboring, smuggling, all that is additional crimes. So yeah, we are using the entire weight of the government to get behind this. And that is a huge morale booster, because so many times, even as chief or when I was an agent or command in the station, you do your best casework, and then you'd have a U.S. attorney say, like, "Well, you know what? We don't really have the resources. We're gonna dismiss the case." Like, I spent 2 days working on this prosecution, and you're going to dismiss it. So that in itself, to provide consequences for people's illegal actions, is a huge morale boost for law enforcement in general, but specifically to the Border Patrol, who have pretty much been told to do nothing under the Biden administration. It's huge. And again, we're seeing that. That is when you have consequences, that in itself is a deterrence. People will not risk their lives. They will not put themselves in harm's way in the hands of traffickers and smugglers when they know, wow, I'm going to spend all my money. I'm going to be exploited, if not assaulted or raped or killed. If I do make it to the border, I'm going to be prosecuted for illegally entering the United States and be placed immediately in removal proceedings and not let go to my buddy's house in Ohio. No, that's a game changer. And that's another reason why we're seeing that decline in illegal crossings. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, when you change incentives, it really makes a difference. I imagine for Border Patrol agents, I would think like other law enforcement officers that they want to make a difference in their community. And this isn't a specific way, but they want to see that they're making a difference because you feel like you're adding value. And then in the past years, it's been futile. Like, it just, no one wants to be part of something that they don't feel like they're making a difference, or their time or energy is being wasted, or even they're putting their life on the line for something that isn't happening. So I imagine there's just a real fulfillment here of purpose, and which would lead to us keeping better Border Patrol agents and attracting even better Border Patrol agents.
Well, you hit on a couple things that are near and dear to my heart, right? So when you have value and you feel, value added, and you make a difference, and you're respected and treated with dignity and honor that you deserve as a sworn law enforcement agent, that makes a big difference in your life. And so we saw the opposite under the Biden administration, with a high level or a high number of suicides across the border security enterprise, whether it was at the ports or the Border Patrol agents, and then just law enforcement in general. That is when you feel like you're no longer have value. Again, I won't say that it was the border crisis that caused the suicides, but if you're having problems at home, mentally, physically, financially, emotionally, and then you don't feel like you have worth at home, and then you come to work and you're being told to let these people go. I mean, I can only imagine what's going through somebody's mind at that time. Now you fast forward to where you are, making a difference, and that may be the difference that somebody needs to continue to seek the help they need. But also, that could be making a difference to your community, and value added to the national security is a huge piece of anybody that takes the oath, whether you're in the military or you're state, local police, or a border patrol agent. You're swearing an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. I'll tell you too. Again, as I mentioned, I've lived along this border for nearly 30 years now. And when you have strong border security, when you have the right infrastructure, whether it's a wall or some kind of vehicle barrier or access roads, when you can make that border secure with the infrastructure, the technology, and the border trains, it makes both sides of the border. Here we're talking about the southern border with Mexico and the United States. It makes that so much more healthier and safer. You see just the overall dynamic of the situation look more organized and less chaotic, less trash, less people hanging around. I'll tell you this story. When I was the deputy chief in El Paso from 2018 to 20, I rented a house up on the Franklin Mountains, and my landlord at the time was an 87-year-old widow, and she was born in El Paso, and part of her family was born in Juarez. And for as long as she can remember, she would tell me how she would always go to church on Sundays and have lunch with her sisters. She's a couple sisters still alive. She's, her last name was Vasquez. I mean, she is from El Paso. She tried and true. She would tell me all the time. And she would call me Chris. And she's like, Chris, if it wasn't for Border Patrol, I couldn't be safe. If it wasn't for the difference the agents made in my town of El Paso, I couldn't go back and forth to Juarez and go to church and have lunch with my sisters. And so that resonated with me, because you hear so much rhetoric, vitriol, and just gaslighting from so many people on the left side of the spectrum, saying, oh, the walls are bad, and the border's this, the border's that, and the border patrol are bad people. There was an 87-year-old, she would be 90 something now. I don't know if she's still alive, but there was somebody that was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, on both sides of that border, with them saying, if it wasn't for Border Patrol, I wouldn't be able to be safe in my own neighborhood, in my own country, and be able to go back and forth and live my life, because y'all made a difference. And that, for me, again, was a reason why I got up and went to work every day. For people like Terry, that was my landlord, that said, hey, you guys make a difference. Where so many politicians, whether it was local politicians or our congressional representative, that was demonizing Border Patrol for what they're doing. But the real residents of the border community, the ones that are born and raised there, that know how much Border Patrol contributes to the neighborhoods, to their communities. They're at the churches, they're going to the restaurants, they're going to school with your kids and families are all together. Those that live there know that. And when you have an administration like the current administration that supports the men and women of the Border Patrol, that's going to help everybody. It's going to help, to your point you were mentioning as well, the recruiting and the retention, because we need the best and brightest in these law enforcement agencies, whether it's your city police, your state police, your county sheriff's departments, or any of your federal agencies. Because when we respond, Border Patrol agents are known to ride to the sound of gunfire. You want those agents to be, the best and brightest, and have their head on straight, so they can respond to the crisis. Or God forbid, you're in your desperate time of need. You want to make sure you have the right people riding to that sound of gunfire to help you and save your life. And that's why it's so important to have leadership like we have coming out of the White House, and in certain states we have good gubernatorial leaders and congressional members that are supporting the men and women in blue, or in my case, green. And it makes all the difference in the world of keeping this country safe.
So switching a little bit from the border to your time at HHS, I'd love to hear first, can you tell us what HHS's role is at the border? Because I don't think a lot of us know that. And then what did you do?
Yeah, no, and I probably won't be able to tell you everything that HHS does. Remember, that's Health and Human Services. So FDA, the CDC, there's so many components with Health and Human Services that, again, it's about national security and public safety, ag security, all the things, good commerce, all that kind of wraps into one. And when you have Center for Disease Control and Food and Drug Administration, they're part of our inspections at the ports of entry. They also have the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and that's the key point in what I was doing. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement was stood up in 1980. It was one of the last things that then President Carter initiated. And if you kind of go back to your history, there was a lot of, you had the what they call the boat people from Vietnam, and you had you still had some Cuban issues with refugees. So they needed a centralized office, and the Office of Refugee Resettlement was established, and it fell under the Legacy Immigration and Naturalization Service. Well, during the transition into the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of Refugee Resettlement was given the responsibility to take care of unaccompanied alien children that were encountered by federal law enforcement at the border or between the ports of entry at the border. That had traditionally been part of INS, Legacy INS, but when they were reshaping the federal government and created DHS, the Office of Refugee Resettlement was responsible for the kids, and it remained in the Office of Health and Human Services. So every time since 2003, when I think it officially went under INS, gave the child program up. Every time an unaccompanied alien child, which is somebody 17 or younger, not with their parent or legal guardian, is encountered, they get placed with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And their job, for what we call ORR's job, is to make sure that the child's welfare is taken care of, identify the appropriate sponsor, whether that is a family member here in the United States or another adult that will adopt them or foster them or put them in a foster care situation because they're unaccompanied children. Well, that was, no one really heard of that program. And it wasn't until the 2000 teens, probably 12, 13, 14, when we started seeing an influx of unaccompanied children, did that become a big problem. The Office of Refugee Resettlement under the then Obama administration was overwhelmed. They didn't have the resources, didn't have the places to place kids, and it got out of control. And again, there was a big uptick in families and kids during that time, and we saw numbers drop in the Trump administration, only to pick up the last year under President Trump, and then through the roof under President Biden. Those numbers under the 4 years of the Biden administration, there was 479,000 unaccompanied children that came into the United States illegally. And those kids, they ranged from months old to 17. And from all over the world.
Why?
And people say, well, and you're saying like, why? How does that happen? Well, that becomes part of the smuggling and trafficking network, because what they'll do is they'll use the kids as kind of the pawns with the families. They'll separate the smugglers will separate mom and dad from the kids, push mom and dad through, and hold on to the kids to ensure accountability to get paid and everything else. And then they'll push the kids through, the border, and then those children be placed with ORR, and then somehow in the minds of the parents, they'll be able to sponsor their kids back and be free to move about the country. The problem was not every parent were the ones sponsoring their kids, and we saw that Office of Inspector General report that came out last year and the year before that the number of like 300,000 children were unaccounted for under the Biden administration, or the last year Trump and into the Biden administration. Yeah, unbelievable that we would lose track. And of course, I wasn't surprised when I got there, but I'll take a little breath here and then see if you have a follow-up question, or I'll get right into the weeds of some of the things that I was able to do and expose.
Oh, no. Yeah. Run right ahead. That's exactly what I love to hear about.
Yeah. So one of the biggest problems we had was the vetting process. I mean, some of the things that we were requiring or allowed to sponsor a child was Photoshop pictures. There are literally pictures out there that are in public. They've been put out in the public of people that are photoshopping. Oh yeah, this is a picture of me with the child's mom, and the mom's feet are not even there. That they've been cut off. Packages. Oh, I need to show a proof of address. Well, here's a Photoshop copy of a package sent to this address. You clearly see that the picture doesn't belong. No driver's license, no fingerprints. The Biden administration ended DNA testing for family relationships. So all this, we were just basically getting kids out of custody and placed in whoever filled out the paperwork. I mean, we're talking, there was 70% of the sampling we did, 70% of the had fraud applications. There was some level of fraud, meaning multiple social security numbers, fake birth certificates, identification cards that were not valid, information that was non-existent, addresses. We showed up at the there was field specialists show up at an address that didn't exist, but yet we released a child there without verification. So that's why you had 300,000 missing kids, because we were letting them go because they were, as long as they checked a box, the administration was allowing that to go. So one of the first things I did when I got there in January was immediately we got to plug the leak, right? So we knew that the border was going to get secure under the operational side of it. I had to go back through policies and start ensuring that we put every common sense piece of policy we could or practice, fingerprints. Every adult in the household, the sponsor and anybody that was an adult, need to be fingerprint, because we were releasing kids to felons. That's not a good place. We made sure that you had to submit documentation that was consistent with our I-9 program, which is our immigration program when it comes down to any kind of job application. Anytime you fill out a job application, you got to fill out, an I-9, and there's verifiable documents you have to submit for that. Basic common sense. DNA testing for family relationships if they did not have a valid document. Criminal checks. We were going to figure out if we were letting these people go to criminals. Those were all common sense practices that we put in place.
But weren't happening before.
No, it wasn't happening before. No. We had situations where a field specialist went to a home to visit a potential sponsor because the documents weren't there, and they went to do a verification, and they said the sponsor has tattoos that are affiliated with the gang. There are other adults that they did not mention on the application. We do not feel that this is a proper placement. That decision by the field specialist was overturned by ORR headquarters because it was the mother. 3 months later, that child, who was, I think, 16 or 17, was found dead in the backseat with his pants down with an adult male who was unconscious in a car in their driveway. You can use your imagination what was probably taking place there. I mean, that was one. We had a case that just got indicted in Ohio, and there was a press release put out by the Department of Justice where we had a 30-year-old who claimed to be the brother of a 14-year-old female. The birth certificate was a fake birth certificate or imposter birth certificate that he claimed. It was pretty pretty obvious it was fake. They placed her anyway at with the objection of the specialist. That 14-year-old was raped by multiple members of that household. That was not her brother. She was got pregnant. They forced an abortion on her, and the Biden administration refused to federally charge them. The state took up charges. We peeled that case back when I got there, and we've also got that person indicted, and other people associated with that case are also part of the indictment investigation. Multiple examples of fraud documents, and I can tell you the big cases that we did within the first couple weeks. All of those have been indicted, and we've already got some convictions. A lot of that is out there on some of the U.S. attorneys' social media accounts. So, I mean, again, this was just so blatantly obvious, and again, I wasn't surprised because I knew how dysfunctional it was. But just some of the examples there. Again, we sampled cases, over like 1,600 cases, just randomly sampled them. 70% of those had fraud. We found not only are we going through the backlog, going through all the old cases under the administration and charging people with fraud and charging people with trafficking and those that are convicted with criminal cases, we're going after them. But we found a tranche of notices of concern. And a notice of concern is anybody associated with that subject, that child, when they are in OR custody or have been released to a sponsor. We found 65,000 of them that went unanswered from August of 23 to January of 25. 65,000 opportunities to make a difference in somebody's life that went unanswered. Now, going through that, and we put a task force together to go through those quickly because time it could be the difference in the child's life. Yeah, some of these notices of concern are from the kids complaining that their sponsor took their Game Boy away. The sponsor, or they didn't like the cereal they got. I mean, it could be crazy stuff like that. There are also ones from neighbors that said, "Hey, this child that was showing up every day hasn't been here in a week, and we don't know what happened to him." There's ones out there that I was told where they said, "Hey, every night this man comes in and touches me inappropriately." Never was acted on. Now, there's a lot of those that were multiple cases that were being investigated, but they never connected the dots. But the fact that there was 65,000 notices of concerns that never got addressed or collated or reconciled is beyond me. There was one person left in charge of that program. And I don't care how efficient our government needs to be. One person is not going to go through that. So we created a task force of about 20 people to go through those, and any criminal, and a lot of it was criminal. Any criminal example or case was immediately turned over to federal law enforcement, and that's kind of what I did is I went in there with a sledgehammer, if you will, and kind of what I knew what I needed to do is bust up practices and policies and put people on notice. A lot of people were no longer part of the administration or took the fork in the road. Probably smarter to do that than to get fired or walked out in handcuffs. Those days will still be coming though, because we have a lot of law enforcement looking internally as well as externally, because people need to be held accountable. But I left it with in good hands, and made it very clear to our ORR and HHS employees that if you knowingly and willfully do something that puts a child in harm's way, we will go after you administratively. In other words, you could lose your job. And if there is a criminal conduct involved, you will be charged and presented for prosecution. The good news is that kind of messaging with the support from the White House. My time there, we didn't have any new cases that resulted in anything that raised our eyebrows. We also, which is very important and quite a difference, and I think this is important too. For years, the practice was when you got an unaccompanied child at the border. Let's just say Border Patrol encountered an 8-year-old, and his 7-year-old sister. So many of these kids would have like a piece of paper, a safety pin to their shirt or somewhere in their possession to call this number. Every unaccompanied child that is encountered at the ports or between the ports, it's 100% required response by Homeland Security Investigations, ICE HSI. They are going down there and they are starting the investigation and looking at that from the moment of encounter. So they will pick up the phone or get that number and go realize, oh, that's at the neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. So let's send the ICE office to this address to go find out, hey, what do you know about this kid? Because that's criminal. That's child trafficking. That's a crime. And so, so these are the kind of things that we never did in the past. You just took the kid, made sure that they were safe as far as, did they look okay? They weren't sick. You made sure they fed them and you got them out there as quickly as possible. No law enforcement beyond Border Patrol was asking any questions. And by the way, trying to communicate with a scared 8-year-old in a foreign language that may not even speak Spanish is very difficult. So to be able to respond upon an encounter or within hours of encounter makes all the difference in saving lives. And that right there is another way that we put the checks and balances in the whole process to ensure that we are not going to turn a kid over to a felon or to a fraud sponsor or somebody that's trafficking. So again, it's a lot of work being done, but a lot of great work being done.
That's great. Well, Chief, I mean, you're truly doing the Lord's work. And I'm so glad that, in this administration that the president's brought in people like you to really help solve this problem and really fight for kids and just fight for responsible policy and fight, basically establish our border so we know who's coming in and who's coming out. So I really appreciate the service that you provided. And I'm so excited that you're joining us again at AFP to keep spreading this word because I think it's so important.
Well, thank you. And aside again, I appreciate the kind remarks about me, but I was part of a team, a great team. 6 days out of the 7-day week, I was on the phone with the National Security Council, Homeland Security Council, Tom Homan, Stephen Miller, several department secretaries, SecDef, Deputy SecDef, all the things that this administration was doing. They're working round the clock for the American people. And in my space, which was border security and ending child trafficking, everything that they could do to put checks and balances or put accountability in place, send law enforcement the right way, they were doing it. And it was an honor to be part of that team. And I did not want, again, to be part of a second government career. I was asked to come up for 90 to 100 days or longer if I wanted to. My family is like, hey, you absolutely need to go up there, but we need you home for some other things that we were dealing with. And so it was an honor to be part of that first 100 days to put the stop to the radical agenda and mindset from the previous administration when it came to kids. It's not happening on our watch. That was kind of what I told then Secretary Kennedy and to the White House is that it's not going to happen because of what we're doing. We're stopping that. And one last thing on that point is these are practices and policies. These things need to be codified through congressional action because practices and policies will change with administrations. And so we got to ensure that all these things that we're putting in place, and I did put something interim final rule in the Federal Register because some of those things were the previous administration was allowing was unethical and illegal based on current law. So we fixed that. But Congress has still got to act. This is not just a one and done. We have to codify this to protect the kids and continue to secure our border.
Chief Clem, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and for all the work you did and really giving us this great insight. Folks, I want to thank Chief Clem for really being a partner to us to getting this word out there and for all the wonderful work that he's done at HHS at his time at Border Security. And hey, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.